Meet Jade, a 4-year-old Labrador. She likes biscuits, belly scratches, and head rubs. But Jade wasn't always this happy. Like hundreds of dogs in Bengaluru, Jade was left to fend for herself after she was abandoned by her owners. A traumatic occurrence that happens far too often. Dogs like Helen, a Rottweiler who was kicked out of her home, Holly, a Saint Bernard found wandering the streets, Beauty and Bruno, who were rescued during the Kodagu floods, and Rudra, a Cocker Spaniel who had been treated so cruelly that shelter workers couldn't touch him. The trauma and emotional stress that a dog feels when he or she is abandoned is very real, and it can take months of work, love, and care to bring those dogs back to a state of happiness. Much of that work begins at Cupa's Second Chance Center in Bengaluru, which houses almost 100 dogs.
People just give up their dogs, or rather abandon them on the roads, because one is, I don't think a lot of people are aware that organizations like us exist where we take in dogs. Two is, I think for a lot of them there is a certain amount of shame attached to it. I think a lot of the times people, rather than actually having to go to an organization and explain why you're giving up the dog, they're much more comfortable just not having to deal with that, and they leave them in well-populated areas where they know animal lovers are there and they know someone will pick up the dog at some point.
India's feeble breeding laws have caused a proliferation of expensive breeds being sold at lowered costs. This, in turn, makes it easier for anyone to own a dog without realizing the cost and commitment that goes into caring for the animal. Many dogs end up being abandoned in these cases, like Jade, who was left at Cupa's center. But because of her friendly demeanor from once being someone's pet, she was brought to Fetch, a canine training center in Bengaluru.
She's a phenomenal companion dog, also very happy to meet children and people. But it's not always the case that not all dogs are this lucky. When a dog is abandoned, goes through a lot of trauma. His owner is never going to come back. It's a big thing for him because he trusts his owner with everything, and then he doesn't know why he's meeting so many dogs. And suddenly his owner's left him there and he's stuck.
Some of the signs of trauma that a dog could exhibit include depression, weight gain, inactivity, skittishness, and a shattered sense of trust that could make him move away from humans and other dogs.
Here at Fetch, C.V. Franklin works with dogs, many of whom have been abandoned. He works to rehabilitate them and relieve them of trauma.
There's a lot of heartbreak that goes into abandonment.
Yeah.
There are times where the dog actually looks for his owner for the next few days. If he hears a male voice with a male owner or a female voice with a female owner, he actually looks for them and says, "Is it them?"
Yeah.
And then eventually realizes that they're not coming back.
In order to rehabilitate the dog, C.V. Franklin says he puts them through physical routines like playing fetch or going for walks, and mental routines like obedience training to get the dog back on its feet. That can take an average of 90 to 120 days.
These things, it's like a gym workout for a heartbroken person. Does you good physically as well as mentally. So it's mental and physical stimulation that actually brings a dog out of the phase of depression.
When a dog is first brought to a shelter like Cupa, there are several costs involved in caring for the animal. This includes blood tests, sterilization, and vaccination if not already done. This can take the initial cost of caring for that animal up to 5,000 to 6,000 rupees.
Then there are monthly expenses that vary from dog to dog, but a dog that requires more maintenance, like a Saint Bernard, will likely cost more. These dogs require grooming, upkeep, and supplements that add up. According to Sanjana, the majority of abandoned dogs come from people who don't take long-term expenses into consideration. It is important that bringing a dog home is an informed decision.
You need to figure out financially if you're stable enough to manage having a dog. Two is if you have the commitment, if you can make that commitment. A dog is, people seem to think a dog means, okay, having the dog for a year or 2 years, so they factor in the next 2 years of their lives. They don't factor in the fact that dogs live for an average of 10 years. during which point you can get married, your job can take you somewhere else, you can have a child, you're gonna face some sort of an illness during that time. These are all factors for you to take into consideration. If you cannot commit to a dog saying that I will treat the dog like I would any other family member, don't get one.
Thanks to the NGOs in the city, many abandoned dogs do end up finding good homes. However, some of them are forced to spend the rest of their lives at shelters, which can be a great burden.
We only have that many shelters and they are full.
Yeah.
So buying more dogs irresponsibly means that we're going to have more abandonment cases.
Fortunately, Jade is one of the luckier dogs whose journey is also just beginning.
Jade is a Labrador who has found a purpose in life. She will be heading to a school to act as a companion.
And she's going to be a companion dog for a lot of kids. Like basically sunshine on a dull day kind of dog. That's what she's going to be.